In this video, I want to talk about the next stage of the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, which is the committee stage. I've got two objectives in it. The first is to tell you what's going to happen with parliamentary procedure next, and the second is to say what type of evidence you should provide if you want to write into the committee once they open it up. So let me start by saying that I'm recording this in the evening of Sunday, the 12th of January. That's just a few days after the second reading took place on Wednesday, the 8th. We're not sure yet when the next committee stage will start. Just let me show you their website as it is at the moment. You'll see it says no date against the committee stage. However, if you find the program page, because on Wednesday there was also a program motion moved and passed, you will see there, let me zoom it in, proceedings in the public bill committee shall, so far as not previously concluded, be brought to a conclusion on Tuesday, the 1st of February. And when I first saw that, my hair more or less stood on edge. But then I realised that when the bill had its first reading, the minister kind of fluffed her lines, didn't know how to answer the question when the second reading would be, and then somebody else prompted her to say tomorrow. And that panicked me, and it panicked one or two of the people I know. However, a little bit of research, and I discovered that the standard answer to all the government bills is tomorrow. And in fact, it's a device. It's a device to get it on the order paper. They know it's not going to take place tomorrow, usually, but it means it's there and they can bring it forward when they did. And in fact, they did it. They brought it forward just a few working days after it had been introduced. Now, I know there was more than 2 weekends between them, which is the recommended minimum, but actually there wasn't a full working week. And that really, I felt, wasn't in the spirit of what the thing takes. Anyway, back to this date of the 11th of February. That is a procedural matter. Parliament always needs a date on the books, but they have ways to put that date back. And where it happens in this, it all comes in those documents that are behind everything that happens in Parliament called the standing orders. And if you looked up standing order 83C, you would find that for a bill committee, there is a programming subcommittee. Now, the programming subcommittee is charged with deciding how long the committee stage is going to take, what pace they're going to go through it, and it's also charged with fixing a reasonable date for it to end. So that will change. The 11th of February is just a date that's there. It is not a real date. However, they will announce it, and it could be, looking at previous examples, it might have been by now, but it could be Monday or it could be Tuesday. I expect it to be in a few days' time. So once it does, we should be able to send in written evidence to the committee. They might have some oral evidence sessions, but you have to be invited by them to go. And it's a personal invitation. But for written evidence, it's a general invitation. And there's a very useful web page, which I will give you more details of. And it's how to submit written evidence to a public bill committee. And it's so useful. Here on the video, you will see that I've created a QR code and a short link so you can look it up if you don't get to the web page where I've got all the information. So on there, it tells you which public bill committees can receive submissions, what should written evidence cover, timescales for submitting, how should written evidence be submitted, guidelines on making a submission, publication of evidence, and who to contact. On all those, there's two links I want to highlight. The first one is a link to a page that says open calls for written evidence. Let me zoom in there. Now you'll see here there's lists of bills that are accepting evidence, but at the time I took that screenshot, this bill wasn't listed. But once it is, we'll know how long this stage will last, and we'll be able to estimate how many sessions there will be. And when it is, the page will look something like this. I've borrowed this from the Employment Rights Bill. I've redacted the date so you don't get confused, but our bill, the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, will have a page like this, which will give us the details. Let's move to another page that we get off our main one, which is a page which tells you how to give evidence to a select committee. It's rather confusing. On the main page, it's called Guidelines on Making a Submission. I want to encourage you to read all of it, but note this page is written particularly for select committees which are slightly different from bill committees. So not everything will be the same, but the main points will be. Okay, that's that section. I want to move on now to another section. I've told you what we know about the date. I want to now move on to why would you want to give evidence to a committee, to this committee? Well, you may want to let off steam, but we've got to be more constructive than that. I've got to be honest, and I've got to say to you, it is very unlikely after 15 years of battling that we'll make big dents into this bill. And I don't think we'll do it by arguing issues of law. British law is subject to Parliament, and if this bill goes through, it will change the law. Now, there is an area where we might have ground to challenge it law, which is human rights and data protection. But those aren't straightforward areas. And if you don't thoroughly understand them, like I don't, if you don't thoroughly understand them, then please don't try and explain them to politicians. Leave them to those with specialist knowledge. There's something far more helpful you can do at this stage. We have seen for the first time in the last 12 months, politicians beginning to recognise that there is a SEND crisis, and now they have. It's all over the papers. How has that been achieved? People have been talking about it for a long time. Parents have, families have. How has it been achieved? By families telling their stories in the press, in front of the Education Committee, and elsewhere. Families have been telling their stories. And I want to say that many of you, today's home educating families, have powerful stories to tell. And if your story is dear to your heart and it really motivates you in the area of home education, then I want to encourage you to make it known. Make it known to this bill committee. Now, there's two reasons for that. And they both revolve around the fact that bill committees publish all the evidence they receive. So if a significant number of parents and young people themselves tell their stories, I can see there being two outcomes. The first of these is MPs will have no excuse to say they didn't know. You will have put your family's stories in front of them. Secondly, it will be there as an archived record which can be referred to in the future as evidence that the state fails children far more routinely than families do. And it will also be there as an invaluable resource for anyone who wants to research what HE families have actually experienced, both in school and after deregistering a child. And it will be on a parliamentary website, and that will give it authority. So if you can get your story there and recorded, this could have long-term benefit. Now, I'm going to talk more about the format of your evidence later in this video, but I've got a list of who may have a story which needs to be told. I don't want you to worry if you think such a body's is better than yours. I want to tell you every story will count. So please tell your story. I should say at this point again that I'm not simply suggesting that parents should be doing this evidence. I'd honestly like to see more dads writing the letters, or at least mum and dad together. But I also want to see young people sending in their evidence. I don't want to force them. I don't want you to put pressure on them. But if any of your children are motivated to do so, then I would encourage you to encourage them to do it. The committee will only expect evidence in writing. But if your children, your young people, your young adults want to find more imaginative ways of doing it, and they're prepared to accept that doing it that way may mean it doesn't get looked at, don't get in their way. Let them do it their way. So, what type of stories might people want to put in? Well, I want to say one of the first one, and I hope you don't mind me putting it this way if it fits you. In recent years, there's been a lot of families that have come to home education as refugees. They never intended to home educate. They were people who put their children in school, but school was proving disastrous for their children. It was harming them. And eventually, and I'm sure you know I'm not exaggerating here, a lot of people have said, we can't leave our children here. And they've looked around, and the only option has been genuine home education. Now, there is a problem. There's lots more ways of home educating children outside of school, what was traditionally known as home education. And personally, I think the Department for Education should find itself able to give different identifiers to the different forms of not in school education. But they don't at the moment. So anything that happens to home educators will happen to anybody who's educating their child out of school. So even if you're using a small learning community or something like that, you as a parent will be required to put your children on the Children Not in School register, and therefore you have a story how that register could end up harming your children in the future. So please, if you've brought your children out of school because it was doing them damage and you found a refuge in home education, and if you're now so glad and positive about it, you don't want them to go back, or even if you do, think about writing in, telling these MPs your story, and then asking them not to let this bill go through as it is, so that it puts your child in danger again. I want to encourage parents with that type of journey to see they can contribute to this committee and help them to understand. A second group who might want to tell their story are those who have been treated badly by their local authority. Now, there's lots of things happening. There was a debate, I think it was in early 23, in March 23, which was the result of a petition. And the result of that, during that debate, an MP from Bradford, Naz Shah, who's Labour, told the committee that one of her constituents had had the local authority visit their home, and the officer who did it insisted on live streaming a video back to the office while he was there. That was a real breach of privacy, and that is on the record. So if you've been badly treated by your LA, get on the record. I'm not saying you name the LA at this point, but I am saying you should get it on the record that the way your LA has treated you. If you've asked them questions about data protection and they've not given you a straight answer, and therefore they've been issuing you with school attendance orders unjustly, well then put it on the record. Get it in front of parliamentarians. However you've been treated, and it's been treated badly by an LA, please put it on their record. Okay, that's another suggestion. This list isn't the only options. I'm just trying to inspire you to get some more. Okay, now, here's another one then. Have you got children who've achieved far more through learning in a family and community setting than they would have done in the classroom? Do your children feel that way? Write in. Oh, by the way, I said earlier about you could write mum and dad, or it'd be good to see a few more dads. Mum and dad can put in separate ones. Look, we're very good in the home educating communities at breaking records. I don't want us to do this for breaking records, but it wouldn't surprise me if we did. So let me say that again. If your children feel they've learned far more since coming out of school than they were ever learning in school, let them write that to the committee and say, why are you trying to get me back into school? Or why is the government? Because that's what this bill will do. It is aimed at forcing more children back into school. Oh, and if you've not seen it, I may put it on a link. The day after the bill through the Children's Commissioner for England said, well, I'm pleased this bill's going through, but it's not strong enough. It needs a lot more powers. And she's not happy with the LA being able to come and inspect your house and things like that. She wants more powers. So we've got to keep fighting, or else the next step will be even more oppressive. So get right and tell them the positive outcomes for your children, how they recovered from school education, and so on. Finally, there are those who have experience and expertise in relevant areas. And I'm not saying you write about your families. What I am saying is let each of us play to our skills. Let each of us there do what we can. So these, as I've said, are only my suggestions. They're there to inspire you. Think outside the box is what I'm saying. Don't think you've got to go through the bill and put in new amendments for the clauses. Don't end at long lengths about the clauses. Tell them your stories wherever possible and say what this bill proposes will damage my children, will not be good for their well-being. We won't go there. That's a Weasley word. Just remember that. It doesn't mean what you mean. It's like socialization. Socialization means to you and me, do they have friends? To politicians, it means, are they being trained to fit into the boxes society wants them to live in? Socialization's got two meanings. In closing this section, I want to make a radical suggestion, because I see this bill as being very hard to prevent going through in one form or another. Some clauses may be weakened, but every parent must seriously consider how they will respond if it achieves its aims in regard to home education and, importantly, independent educational settings. So small learning communities I mentioned earlier, they're covered in clauses 30 to 37. That's the section after the one on children not in school registers. Faced with the fact this bill's going to get through unless there's another war or something of that like, I want to encourage every parent, everybody who listens to this video, in the process of writing your submission, to ask yourselves if, as a family, you would allow the state to bully your child into school when you know it's not in their best interests. Think about that seriously, because that is the long-term objective of the Department of Education. Read the European Convention on Human Rights memorandum that's been published, and look in there, look for references to a German case, Conrad v. Germany. In there, there's 6 or 7 references. And the GDFE are appealing to that case, and I think wrongly, but they think correctly, to justify compulsory school attendance. That is in black and white. So it is a real threat. So think this through. Will you let the state force your child back into school when it's not their wish, it's not what they want, and when it's against their best interests? And if you feel like that, you tell the committee that you will not let it happen, even if it means whatever it means. I want to say, if many of us, with conviction, put that in these submissions, I think if they hear it often enough, they will take notice. We need clear statements that this bill will make that happen if it's not weakened. So that is what I want to encourage you to think about. I'm now going to move on to some practical things of how to submit your evidence. I've earlier pointed to a web page called Give Evidence to a Select Committee. There's a lot on there, as I mentioned earlier. But here's some practical things I didn't mention. The format. There is a request that you send it in an editable text format, probably Word or an open document, LibreOffice type document, or similar, not in a PDF. They want to be able to edit it and format it quickly for their website. Not in an email, I would suggest, and less than 25 megabytes in size. And they specifically said, even if you're submitting your evidence on behalf of an organization or company, please do not include a logo. Length, there's nothing specified about the length, but I would say not too long. For most of you, I would suggest 2 or at the most 3 A4 pages, roughly with a font size of 12 point. Remember, pages and pages will make it less likely to be read in detail. We are not in a case they will listen just because you say a lot. If you say something concisely and well, it will have more impact. So not reams and reams, please. 2 to 3 pages, well written. If your story can engage the reader, they are less likely to move quickly on to the next submission. Give them some personal, give them something to bring them in. On the matter of privacy, and I want to say this is important, the page says there is no need to put your contact details on your submission. It says you'll be asked for these separately as part of the process of sending your contribution. Now, I don't see how that will work if you're emailing it in, which is what it suggests you do. But I want to suggest that you include your personal details in the email that you attach your submission to. Importantly, in the text, do not use your children's names or any other information that could identify them. When the Education Committee carried out an inquiry into home education in 2020, they got a record number of submissions, but they didn't publish them all. And they said they couldn't because there was too much to be redacted in some of them. They didn't have the staff and with the time to do the work. And we don't want that to happen this time. We want them to be able to publish everything. So please be very careful. Do not put things like your children's name or the names of any LA officers or anything like that into your submission. Keep it anonymous. If you're writing about a single child, then use phrases like our child or my child throughout. If you're writing about 2 or more, identify them in some way. You could say our eldest, or you could say my child D, or our second child. Be helpful here. Don't give them an excuse not to publish it. I also want to suggest that you do not state where you live or name your local authority in the text of the submission. If necessary, if you feel it's relevant, you could say that you live in a large city, a small town, or even a rural area. But please don't give them evidence that they need then to redact. Give them a clean document they've only got to upload into web format and publish. Now, if you don't want the committee to publish your name alongside your submission, I suggest that you state the reason in the email and give it a short explanation. But please be careful with all of your wording, even when you ask not to publish your name, because we don't want these things to lose impact. It's important that they get into the public domain. Other points on their list of things to do, they say again, keep your evidence short, use section headings and numbered paragraphs. You should be able to do that in a word processing app. If you write more, then offer a summary at the start. So if you get over 3 pages, turn it from an introduction into a summary of what you're going to say. They say what you send in must be original, created specifically for the committee, and not published elsewhere. So you can't take somebody else's stuff that they've put out into the public domain and just send that in. And I would say don't even just send in something that they've written and you've adjusted. I would say on this occasion, send in your story. If you want to publish it, you have got to get permission off the committee. I'd like to publish mine. I want an open submission that people know I've said. If you want to do that with yours, we can't do it until they do it, until they give us permission individually, or till they've put it on their website. Once it's on their website, you can publish yours wherever you will, but only what is on their website will be covered by parliamentary privilege. Finally, in this list, I think, is your contribution must be honest and accurate, and you must be ready to confirm to the committee that the text is a true representation of your views, even if others helped you write it. So don't make it sound more dramatic than it was. Don't say things that haven't happened to you. Talk about what has happened to you. My suggestion is that you start by introducing your family. Say things like how long you've been home educating and why you started doing so. Put in, if you want, a brief summary of what you're trying to say them. Give them that type of introduction and then tell your story. If you're doing a story, which I hope most of you will do, avoid repetition. And no matter how frustrated you get, please don't rant. Please don't shout at them. Just tell them and let them hear the pain you've been through if that's in your story. Keep it moving and avoid unnecessary details. Give them enough for them to engage. Make sure you include a conclusion which has some type of request in it. Let me say again, you don't need to suggest an amendment. You shouldn't be trying to cover every point of the bill that you don't like. But you need to say, please take this action. Now, like me, you probably want them to tear up the bill and stop trying to enforce registration on every child educated outside of school so they can be monitored and assessed. Even if you tell them that's your preference, I suggest you ask for something which is more achievable. An example, there's one clause in the bill that is proposing a long list of silly things for parents to give information about. How many hours do you spend educating them? Every waking hour. You obviously don't understand home education, Mr. DFE. Things like that. They're silly. They're not thought through. You can tell them to take things like that out because it will put an undue burden on you as a parent. And as I said, it shows a complete lack of understanding of what true family-based learning is about. Well, I don't know how long this video will turn out, but there was a lot to cover. So I hope you found it helpful. Please remember that the information about the bill is correct only at the time of recording. By the time I get it loaded up, which I hope will not be long, but by the time I get it loaded up, the committee may have published more details about its sessions. And by the time, or that may be so by the time you've watched it. And finally, can I ask you, if you found this video helpful, please pass it on to as many others as you can. We need a lot of responses to get the message across. You never know, some of them might be picked up by the newspaper. Wouldn't that be good if the newspapers, if the media started saying, look at all these stories, let's get them in there. It's your story. It's your hurt, your child's hurt. Let's get them out there. Let's tell them the damage we're protecting children from. Thank you for listening.